In the ruthless maze of Manhattan, where $23 stands between survival and the streets, destiny holds its breath. Tom Mitchell wasn't supposed to be anyone's hero, not with eviction looming, not with his mother's cancer bills drowning him, not with his dreams dying a little more each day behind the counter of the daily grind. But when an elegant woman's credit card declined, something in her eyes mirrored his own desperation, and he reached for his last dollars without hesitation. He couldn't have known he was serving Margaret Chen, the phantom billionaire who'd spent 3 decades secretly testing humanity's darkest corners. She'd watched thousands fail her carefully orchestrated tests of character, each rejection hardening her belief that kindness died with wealth. Until today, until him. This isn't just another rags-to-riches fairy tale. This is how one cup of coffee shattered an empire of cynicism. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Queens. General Hospital cast a sickly glow across Tom's mother's face as he clutched her latest medical bill. $48,000. The number burned into his retinas like a death sentence. He'd already sold everything worth selling. His father's watch, his laptop, even his prized collection of vintage vinyl records. Now sitting in his shoebox apartment in Queens, surrounded by stacks of overdue notices highlighted in angry red, Tom pulled out his worn leather journal and did what he'd done every night for the past year. Counted every penny. Rent, $200, due in 3 days. Mom's medication, $380 overdue. Electric bill, $89, final notice. Food. He stopped writing. What was the point? The math never changed. 5 years of waiting tables at the daily grind had taught him one thing: there would never be enough. The tips barely covered his subway fare, and his base salary vanished into the black hole of his mother's cancer treatments. His manager, Steve, had already rejected his request for extra shifts 3 times this week. "You're barely staying awake during your regular hours, Mitchell," he'd said not unkindly. "I can't have you passing out and dropping plates." Tom glanced at the small photo taped to his refrigerator, him and his mother at Coney Island, back when she could still walk without assistance, back when her smile didn't hide pain. He'd been 8, sticky with cotton candy and drunk on summer dreams. "You'll do great things someday, Tommy," she'd said, brushing sand from his hair. "You've got a heart of gold, just like your father." His father. Another bill he couldn't pay. The funeral costs had eaten through their modest savings 5 years ago, leaving them with nothing but memories and mounting debt. Tom touched the coffee-stained apron hanging by the door, tomorrow's uniform already mocking him. 6 years of community college night classes, scraping for an accounting degree he still hadn't finished. 1 more year, he kept telling himself. 1 more year of double shifts and instant noodles, of watching other people's success stories unfold over their $7 lattes. His phone buzzed, a text from the hospital. His mother's next treatment was scheduled for Friday. Payment expected up front. Tom's hands trembled as he opened his journal again, flipping to the back where he kept his emergency fund log. $23. After today's impulsive act of kindness, buying that stranger's coffee, he was down to $23 and a collection of broken promises. The irony wasn't lost on him. He couldn't afford his own coffee most days, yet something about that. Woman's embarrassment, the slight tremor in her hand as her card was declined, had touched a nerve. He'd seen that look too many times in his own mirror not to act. $4.50. Nearly a fifth of everything he owned, spent on a stranger's moment of dignity. His mother would have approved. "Kindness always comes back around," she'd say, even now, between bouts of chemo and morphine dreams. But kindness didn't pay bills. Kindness didn't stop cancer. Kindness was a luxury he couldn't afford, yet somehow it was the only thing he had left to give. The rattling heater in the corner sputtered and died, as if punctuating his thoughts. Tom pulled his father's old Ranger's sweatshirt tighter around his shoulders and did something he hadn't done since the diagnosis. He prayed. Not for money or miracles, but for strength. Strength to face another dawn, another shift, another day of watching his mother fade while the world spun madly on, indifferent to their quiet desperation. Margaret Chen's penthouse suite at the Pierre Hotel offered a god's-eye view of Central Park. But she wasn't looking at it. Instead, her attention was fixed on a worn leather notebook, its pages yellow with age and heavy with 3 decades of observations. Each entry, written in her precise handwriting, documented humanity's failures and the rare moments of grace that kept her experiment going. Subject 47,293, she wrote, her Mont Blanc pen hovering over today's entry. Male, late 20s, service industry, observed financial distress, worn shoes, frayed cuff, visible fatigue. Despite clear personal hardship, subject provided assistance. Without hesitation, no witnesses present, no apparent expectation of reward or recognition. First genuine response in... She paused, flipping back through her notes. 73 days. The morning sun caught the edge of her simple silver watch, a $30 Timex that matched her carefully cultivated appearance of middle-class struggle. Her real watches, a collection worth millions, sat unused in a vault 40 floors below. Today's costume had been perfect. The threadbare coat from Goodwill, the scuffed shoes, the outdated handbag. Even the declined credit card had been orchestrated, one of hundreds she maintained for these tests. Margaret closed her eyes, remembering another time, another life. Shanghai, 1962. A little girl watching her father count coins in their one-room apartment, his restaurant dreams crumbling under Mao's Cultural Revolution. "Remember, May," he'd said, using her childhood name, "money shows you who people really are. Not having it, not even making it, but what they do when they think no one is watching them have it." She'd taken those words to heart, building them into the foundation of her empire. While other billionaires flaunted their wealth, Margaret had turned invisibility into an art form. Her real estate empire, Chen Holdings, operated through layers of shell companies. Her rare public appearances were conducted through proxies. Even her board of directors had never met the true Margaret Chen, only the carefully constructed persona she presented. The experiment had started small, a dropped wallet here, a declined card there. But as her wealth grew, so did her disillusionment. She'd watched supposed philanthropists ignore crying children, seen charity board members walk past homeless veterans, witnessed corporate ethics officers steal from tip jars. Each observation was dutifully recorded, each failure reinforcing her father's harsh wisdom. Until today. Margaret opened her notebook again, studying the waiter's entry. What made him different? His action defied her statistical models, challenged her carefully constructed worldview. In 30 years of testing, she'd documented 47,292 subjects. Only 2.3% had shown any inclination toward genuine altruism. Of those, less than 0.1% had done so while experiencing significant personal hardship. She pulled up the cafe's employee records on her tablet, another advantage of owning the building through a maze of holding companies. Thomas Mitchell, 5 years of employment, perfect attendance, multiple requests for additional shifts, a half-finished accounting degree at Queen's Community College. Nothing remarkable except Margaret found herself reaching for her father's old pocket watch, her one concession to sentimentality. "When you find someone who gives what they cannot spare," he'd told her once, "you've found someone worth keeping." She dismissed it as immigrant optimism, a relic of simpler times. But now, staring at the picture of a tired young man in a coffee-stained apron, Margaret Chen, the woman who turned cynicism into a science, felt something she hadn't experienced in decades: curiosity. A week later, the Daily Grind's security cameras captured a different Margaret Chen, Gone was the threadbare coat, replaced by crisp business casual that screamed middle management. She'd spent an hour selecting the perfect outfit: Ann Taylor blazer, sensible shoes, department store pearls. Expensive enough to belong in a Manhattan cafe, cheap enough to avoid attention. Tom didn't recognize her. Why would he? She was just another face in the morning rush, another laptop warrior claiming a corner table. But she recognized the subtle changes in him, the darker circles under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands suggesting too much coffee and too little sleep. "Sir, please, I can remake it." Tom's voice carried across the cafe, drawing Margaret's attention. A red-faced executive was brandishing a cappuccino like a weapon. "I specifically asked for oat milk." "This is clearly almond. Do you have any idea what almond milk does to my digestion? I could sue this establishment." Margaret watched over her laptop screen, her notebook open beside her. Most service workers would have cracked by now, snapped back, rolled their eyes, let their frustration show. But Tom's response defied her expectations once again. "I absolutely understand, sir. My mother has similar dietary restrictions. Let me fix this right away, and your drink is on me today." His voice carried a warmth that seemed to catch the executive off guard. "And if you'd like, I can make a note on our system to always ensure your drinks are made with oat milk." The angry customer deflated visibly. You don't have to pay for it yourself." "I want to," Tom insisted, already moving to remake the drink. "Your health is more important than a few dollars." Margaret's pen moved across her notebook. Subject demonstrates consistent behavior pattern. Sacrifices personal resources to diffuse conflict. Notable. References personal connection, mother to build empathy. Strategy effective in 94% of observed interactions. She spent the next 2 hours documenting every interaction. Tom, with the homeless man who could only afford plain coffee, secretly adding a warm muffin to his order. Tom, with the young student whose credit card kept declining, finding a surprise loyalty reward on her account. Tom, with his co-workers, taking the worst shifts, covering breaks, quietly wiping tables while fielding phone calls that made his face tighten with worry. The security cameras caught it all, feeding directly to Margaret's tablet. Every angle, every expression, every small act of grace performed when he thought no one was watching. In 30 years of observation, she'd learned to spot the frauds, the people who performed kindness for social media, for reputation, for eventual gain. Tom's behavior followed no such pattern. Her phone buzzed. Another report from her private investigators. Tom's mother's medical bills, his loan applications, his credit score, all the numbers told the same story. He was drowning. By any logical metric, he should have been bitter, should have hoarded every penny, should have... A crash interrupted her thoughts. A young barista had dropped an entire tray of drinks. As her colleagues stepped back from the mess, Tom was already moving, pulling extra napkins from his apron. "Hey, it's okay, Sarah. Remember my first week? I spilled an entire cold brew dispenser. At least these weren't all for one order, right?" He was already on his knees, sopping up the spill, his own. Shoes getting soaked. "Let's get this cleaned up together." Margaret closed her notebook. In the reflection of her laptop screen, she caught a glimpse of her own expression, something between confusion and revelation. She'd designed thousands of tests over the years, carefully crafted scenarios to probe the depths of human nature. But sitting here watching a broke waiter consistently choose kindness over convenience, grace over grievance, she realized she might have stumbled upon her most important subject yet. The question was, what to do about it? Chen Holdings' executive. Sweet needed a new personal assistant like a shark needed a life jacket. Margaret had ensured this by orchestrating the sudden departure of her current PA. A generous severance package and a dream job offer in London had done the trick. Now, watching the cameras at the daily grind, she waited for her moment. The envelope in her designer handbag felt heavy with possibility. Inside, an invitation to apply for a position that didn't officially exist yet, on paper that cost more than Tom made in a week. The salary figure she'd chosen was precise, enough to cover his mother's medical bills and rent, but not so much as to raise suspicion. $75,000 a year, life-changing for him, pocket change for her. More coffee, Mum? Tom appeared at her elbow, coffee pot in hand. Dark patches under his eyes suggested another sleepless night. Actually, Margaret let her tablet slip from her fingers. It clattered to the floor, screen cracking with a sound that made several customers wince. A month's salary for Tom, sacrificed for verisimilitude. He was already kneeling, retrieving the tablet with careful hands. "I'm so sorry about that. Let me take a look. Sometimes it's just the screen protector. It's fine, really. I should have been more careful." She watched him examine the device, noting how he angled it to catch the light. "You seem to know your way around technology. Community college. Computer maintenance helps pay the bills." He paused, embarrassment flickering across his face. "Or it did, before I had to sell my repair kit." "Perfect." Margaret reached for her bag. "You wouldn't happen to know of any good repair shops nearby?" "I have a rather important meeting this afternoon. I could recommend a few, but—" He hesitated, that same instinct for kindness warring with practicality. "They'll charge you triple what the repair is worth. If you have half an hour, I get my break at 11. I still have some basic tools at home. I could at least assess the damage for you." She made a show of checking her watch. "That would be incredibly helpful, but please, I insist on paying for your time. No charge. Consider it an apology for not catching the tablet in time." Margaret felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had decades ago, watching her father give away free meals to struggling families, even as their own rent went unpaid. "At least let me buy you coffee during your break." His smile was genuine but tired. "That's very kind, but I get free coffee here. Perks of the job." He glanced at the clock. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on my other tables. I'll be back at 11. She watched him hurry off to refill cups and clear tables, his movements efficient despite his exhaustion. Opening her cracked tablet, she pulled up his file again. 3 cancelled medical appointments for himself in the past month. A payday loan. Application denied yesterday. A pawnshop receipt for his laptop. The envelope felt heavier now. Inside wasn't just a job offer, it was a lifeline. But Margaret had learned long ago that lifelines could become chains. She'd seen too many people transform once money entered the equation. Watched kindness curdle into calculation. The real test wouldn't be whether Tom took the job. It would be what he did with it. At exactly 10:58, she pulled out a business card she'd had printed specially. Margaret Wong, executive recruiter, Chen Holdings. A carefully crafted legend, close enough to her real identity to maintain consistency, far enough to avoid suspicion. One of hundreds of aliases she maintained for her experiments. She watched Tom handle his last few customers before his break, noting how he remembered their usual orders, their children's names, their small preferences. Each interaction was a data point, each moment of genuine connection, another entry in her growing file. When he finally sat down across from her with his tablet repair kit, borrowed from a co-worker she'd learn later, Margaret Chen prepared to set in motion a chain of events that would either prove her lifelong cynicism justified or force her to reconsider everything she thought she knew about human nature. "Before we look at the tablet," she said, sliding the envelope across the table, "I have a rather unusual proposition for you." The Chen Holdings building knifed into the Manhattan sky like a blade of glass and steel, its 70 stories of corporate power making Tom's palms sweat. His one good suit, rescued from the back of his closet and hastily pressed, felt like a costume. The security guard's eyes lingered on his scuffed shoes as he presented his interview badge. 68th floor, the guard said, checking his list. "Executive suite. Ms. Wong is expecting you." The elevator ride felt like ascending to Mount Olympus. Each floor brought him further from the familiar world of coffee orders and tip jars into a realm where people casually discussed millions like he talked about spare change. His reflection in the polished elevator walls betrayed his nerves, tie slightly crooked, hair refusing to lay flat despite his best efforts. "You look like him," Tom startled. He hadn't noticed the elderly janitor who'd joined him around the 30th floor. The man was studying him with unusual intensity. "I'm sorry?" "My son." Same look in his eyes when he came for his interview, like he was waiting for someone to tell him he didn't belong. The janitor smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "He's CFO now, 23rd floor." Before Tom could respond, the elevator chimed. "Executive suite," the automated voice announced. The janitor winked as Tom stepped out. "Good luck, son. Remember, they're just people too." The executive floor was all muted elegance. Cream walls, plush carpeting that swallowed footsteps, abstract art pieces that probably cost more than his mother's entire medical bill. A sleek desk dominated the reception area, behind which sat a woman who made Tom think of steel wrapped in silk, Mr. Mitchell. Her smile was professional but cold. "Ms. Wong will see you now." Margaret sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a small boat, her simple business attire somehow making Tom feel even more underdressed. The cracked tablet sat before her like an inside joke. "Please, sit." She gestured to a chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "I hope you don't mind, but this won't be a traditional interview." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 scenarios. You discover a colleague has been embezzling small amounts of money to pay for their child's cancer treatment. A wealthy client asks you to help them dodge taxes through questionable but technically legal means. Your supervisor takes credit for your work, earning a bonus that could have covered your family's expenses. "No right answers," Margaret said, watching him intently. "Just honest ones." Tom stared at the scenarios, each one hitting uncomfortably close to home. In the silence of the office, he could hear his mother's voice. "Integrity isn't for sale, Tommy. Not for any price." "The first case," he began slowly, "I'd help them find legitimate resources, medical grants, payment plans, assistance programs. I know from experience they exist, even if they're hard to find." Margaret's pen moved across her notebook. "And the tax situation? I'd decline, politely but firmly. Legal doesn't always mean right, even if refusing cost you the job. Some costs are higher than losing a job." The questions continued, each one a carefully crafted moral maze. Tom felt like he was being dissected, every answer revealing something he hadn't meant to show. Yet Margaret's expression never changed, her notes offering no clue whether he was passing or failing this unusual test. Finally, she closed her notebook. "One last question, Mr. Mitchell. Why did you help me with my coffee last week?" The question caught him off guard. I'm sorry?" The declined card, the $4.50. "Why?" Tom felt heat rise in his cheeks. "You remember that? Please answer the question." He thought about lying, about crafting some answer that would sound noble or professional, but his mother's voice echoed again. "Truth doesn't need decoration, Tommy, because I know what it feels like," he said simply. Having a card declined. Feeling like everyone's watching, sometimes dignity is worth more than a few dollars. For the first time, something flickered in Margaret's eyes, recognition perhaps, or memory. She reached into her desk and withdrew an envelope. The position of executive assistant requires discretion, integrity, and an understanding of human nature that can't be taught. She placed the envelope in front of him. "The salary is non-negotiable. The hours will be long. The responsibilities significant." Tom's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. The number made his vision blur. This is very generous, but I don't have the experience." "You have something rarer." Margaret stood, extending her hand. "You have character." As Tom shook her hand, neither of them could have known they were setting in motion events that would shake the foundations of both their worlds. The janitor's words echoed in his mind. They're just people too. If only he knew how wrong that assumption would prove to be. First days were supposed to be about paperwork and orientation. Instead, Tom found himself in the middle of a corporate tempest before he'd even figured out how to work the executive coffee machine. "The Zhang portfolio is tanking," a silver-haired executive barked, storming past Tom's desk. "Where's Wong? She needs to sign off on the liquidation before we lose another million." Tom's fingers hovered over his new keyboard, sleek, expensive, utterly foreign. Margaret had been clear. No one entered her office without going through him first. But how do you tell a man wearing a watch worth more than your yearly salary to wait? "Sir," Tom stood, channeling 5 years of handling irate coffee customers. "Ms. Wong is in a closed meeting, but if you'll allow me 2 minutes, I can review the situation and determine if it warrants an interruption." The executive, Harrison Wells, according to Tom's hastily memorized org chart, looked at him like he'd suggested they go skateboarding. "Do you have any idea what a basis point is worth in this market, boy?" Tom took a deep breath. "No, sir. But I do know that Ms. Wong's current meeting involves the Chen Foundation's annual funding allocation, $15 billion in charitable commitments. Would you like me to calculate the basis points on that?" Something shifted in Wells' expression. Surprise, perhaps respect. 2 minutes, he growled. "Then I'm going in anyway." Tom's hands moved across the keyboard, pulling up files he'd spent all night studying. The Zhang portfolio, recent market trends, Margaret's annotation system, which he'd begun to decode. A pattern emerged. "Sir," he said, just as Wells reached for the door handle. "The Zhang losses, they're artificial, aren't they? Part of the Harrison Chen strategy from last quarter." Wells froze. "How did you—" "The pattern matches the simulation Ms. Wong ran in March. If we liquidate now, we lock in the losses. But if we hold—" Tom pulled up another document. "We're perfectly positioned for the rebound when the tech sector announces earnings next week." The door to Margaret's office opened. She stood there, a ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "Harrison, I see you've met my new assistant. Tom, would you join us? Bring the Zhang files." As Tom gathered the documents, his hands shook slightly. The morning's employee handbook, all 847 pages of it, sat accusingly on his desk. He hadn't made it past page 23, where Margaret's handwritten note in the margins had caught his eye. Character before competence, always. Inside her office, Margaret gestured for Tom to sit. The view of Manhattan through her floor-to-ceiling windows made his head spin. How many coffee shops like the Daily Grind were down there? How many other broke waiters were counting their last dollars? "Walk us through your analysis," Margaret said, interrupting his thoughts. Tom swallowed hard. I might be completely wrong. I only had access to these files last night, and most of the terms are still new to me." "Yet you stopped a $100 million mistake from happening," Wells said, his earlier hostility replaced by curiosity. "How?" "Pattern recognition, sir. 5 years of tracking regular customers' coffee orders teaches you to spot routines. The Zhang portfolio's losses followed the same rhythm as the test scenarios in Ms. Wong's March report. Like when a customer says they hate vanilla, but really they're just waiting for the price to drop." A strange sound filled the office. It took Tom a moment to realize Harrison Wells was laughing. "Wong, where did you find this one? A barista who speaks market psychology?" But Margaret wasn't laughing. She was watching Tom with that same intense focus from the interview. "Thank you, Harrison, that will be all." After Wells left, Margaret opened her desk drawer and pulled out a familiar leather notebook. "Tell me, Tom, how many hours did you spend studying those files last night?" "All of them," he admitted. "I couldn't sleep anyway. Mum's first treatment under the new insurance is today, and I wanted to make sure I understood everything," she finished. "Because that's what you do, isn't it?" Try to understand everything so you can help everyone, she made a note in her book. Tom caught a glimpse of his name at the top of the page, followed by what looked like a growing list of observations. "Sir, you don't know me from Adam," he heard himself saying, his father's favorite phrase slipping out. "Why did you really hire me?" Margaret closed her notebook. "Because, Mr. Mitchell, in a world where everyone is watching out for themselves, you watch out for others. That makes you either a fool or exactly what this company needs." She stood, straightening her blazer. "We'll find out which soon enough," as, if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Margaret's phone lit up with urgent messages. Tom's brand-new computer screen filled with red alerts. "It seems," Margaret said calmly, "that your second test begins now." The alarm screamed through Chen Holdings as Tom raced down the corridor behind Margaret, his new dress shoes slipping on polished marble. Security teams converged from every direction, their earpieces crackling with urgent chatter. Server room. Compromised, unauthorized access, potential data breach. Margaret moved with surprising speed for someone in heels, her face a mask of calm that made Tom's stomach twist. He'd seen that expression before, on his mother, when she was hiding bad news about her tests. "Ms. Wong," he called out, clutching his tablet. "Shouldn't we alert Ms. Chen? The actual Ms. Chen." She didn't break stride. "What makes you think we haven't?" The server room was chaos. Dozens of screens displayed cascading data, each one flashing red warnings. Tech teams hammered at keyboards while executives hovered, their perfect suits beginning to show sweat stains. "Ma'am," a security chief approached Margaret. "We need your authorization to—" He stopped, eyes widening. "I mean, Ms. Chen, we need—" Tom's world tilted sideways. He looked at Margaret, really looked at her, and suddenly every piece clicked into place. The way everyone deferred to her, the unlimited access, the tests. He'd been serving coffee to a billionaire, and she'd been testing him all along. "You're her," he whispered. "You're Margaret Chen." "Later," she snapped, but her eyes held something like regret. "Right now, I need you to focus. Remember the Harrison Chen strategy? Apply that pattern recognition of yours to these logs." Tom's mind reeled, but 5 years of handling rush-hour crowds had taught him to compartmentalize. He forced himself to look at the screens, to see past the chaos to the patterns underneath. "These attacks," he said slowly, "they're like the Zhang. Portfolio, artificial. Look, they're too perfect, too rhythmic." He pointed to a sequence. "Like a customer who always complains about their drink being too hot, just to get a free one. They want us to focus on this while something else is happening." The real Margaret Chen's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Tom's fingers flew across the nearest keyboard, pulling up system logs. "Here, small transactions, thousands of, and them, hidden under the noise. They're not trying to steal data, they're moving money, but," he frowned, "they're moving it to our own charitable accounts?" A slow smile spread across Margaret's face. "Bertrand," she said softly, "my dear old friend, still trying to save the world." She straightened, her voice carrying across the room. "Stand down. This is a test of our emergency protocols. Congratulations. Most of you failed spectacularly." Her eyes found Tom. "Almost all of you." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Margaret silenced them with a raised hand. "Mr. Mitchell, my office, now." The walk back was endless. Tom's mind raced through every interaction, every test, every carefully orchestrated moment. The declined card, the tablet, the interview. He'd been auditioning for a role he didn't even know existed. Inside her office, Margaret Chen, the real Margaret Chen, poured 2 glasses of water. Her hands, Tom noticed, were shaking slightly. "Bertrand." "Laurent," she said, handing him a glass. "My oldest competitor and closest friend. Once a year, he tests my security systems. Says it keeps us both honest." She sat behind her desk. "Just like I test people's humanity." "Why?" The question burst from Tom before he could stop it. "Why?" All the deception, the games, because true character reveals itself when people think no one is watching. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a newspaper, the Forbes magazine, with her photo on the cover. When my father died, he left me two things, his pocket watch and a warning. Money, he said, doesn't change who people are. It reveals who they've always been. Tom stared at the magazine, at the woman who'd ordered countless coffees from him, who'd orchestrated an elaborate play just to test his character. "And what did I reveal? Hope," she said simply. "In 30 years of testing humanity, you're the first person to make me question my own cynicism." She leaned forward. "But now I have to know, does that hope survive knowing the truth? Now that you see who I really am, who I've been all along, will you treat me differently?" Tom thought about his mother, about the medical bills that had seemed insurmountable just days ago, about kindness and deception, truth and tests, about coffee cups and billion-dollar empires. "You're still just someone who needed coffee," he said finally. "The rest is just details." Margaret Chen, the woman Forbes called the invisible billionaire, did something then that her board of directors would swear had never happened before. She laughed. Word spread through Chen Holdings. Like wildfire, the whispers followed Tom everywhere. Margaret's experiment, they called him. The charity case. The coffee boy who got lucky. Each morning his inbox filled with passive-aggressive emails, carefully worded to seem helpful while questioning his every decision. Tom stared at his computer screen, at the mistake that threatened to confirm everyone's worst assumptions. A decimal point. A tiny decimal point in a wire transfer, and suddenly $5 million sat in the wrong account. His finger hovered over the phone, Margaret's direct line just one button away. Trouble in paradise. Rebecca Morton, Senior VP of Operations, perched on the edge of his desk. Her smile reminded Tom of sharks he'd seen at the aquarium, all teeth and predatory intent. "Nothing I can't handle," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the panic clawing at his throat. "Oh, but I insist." She leaned closer. "Designer. Perfume almost masking the scent of ambition. After all, we wouldn't want Margaret's special project to fail, would we?" The emphasis on special made his skin crawl. But his mother's voice echoed in his head. "Pride is expensive, Tommy. Sometimes asking for help costs less." He opened his email, composed a new message. To mchenichenholdings.com subject. Urgent. Transfer error resolutions. Chen, I made a mistake. 5M transferred to subsidiary account ending 847 instead of 874. Implementing correction protocol, but wanted you aware immediately. Tom, her response came seconds later from mchenichenholdings.com re. Urgent. Transfer error resolution. How would you fix this if I weren't available? MC Tom felt Rebecca reading over his shoulder, her presence a reminder of everything he had to prove. But as he stared at Margaret's question, something clicked. This wasn't about the money. It was another test. His fingers moved across the keyboard. To mchenichenholdings.com re. Urgent. Transfer error. Resolution. Already frozen both accounts to prevent further transfers. 2. Documented error chain. For compliance 3. Prepared correction transfer 4. Will implement additional verification step for all transfers. 1 MIMP need your authorization for correction, but system is secured. Tom, impressive. Rebecca's voice dripped with sarcasm. But you still lost $5 million. I wonder what the board will say when a new email popped up. From mchenichenholdings.com to allstaff@holdings.com. Subject new transfer protocol effective immediately. All transfers exceeding $1 require double verification per Mitchell protocol. See attached documentation. Well handled, Tom. Rebecca's smile froze. Tom thought about offering her coffee. Old habits died hard, but instead turned back to his screen. Was there something else you needed, Ms. Morton? She left without another word, but Tom knew this wasn't over. In his desk drawer, next to his old daily grind name tag, lay a stack of business cards. Thomas Mitchell, executive assistant to Margaret Chen. Each one felt like a target on his back. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "First round of new treatment today. Doctor says it's working. Thank you, Tommy. Don't work too hard." He smiled, remembering why he was here. The money wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was life and death for people like his mom, like the families that would benefit from that. 5 million once it reached the right account. Another email arrived, this one from an address he didn't recognize, from undercoverboss@gmail.com, subject, "Opportunity knocks, Mr. Mitchell. Your handling of Chen's little tests is impressive, but are you really content being her latest social experiment? I represent individuals who recognize true talent. Lunch tomorrow? Your discretion is assumed." A friend, Tom's finger, moved to delete, but something stopped him. Not temptation. He'd meant what he said about loyalty, but pattern recognition had become his life, and something about this felt important. He forwarded the email to Margaret with a single line. Thought, "You should see this. Not the first, won't be the last." Her response was equally brief. "Trust goes both ways. Lunch tomorrow, my office. Bring your evidence folder." Tom leaned back, loosening his tie slightly. In his reflection on the window, he barely recognized himself. 2 weeks ago, his biggest crisis had been running out of oat milk during morning rush. Now, he was playing corporate chess with pieces worth millions. But as he looked past his reflection to the city below, he spotted the daily grind. Even from 68 floors up, he could see the line of customers snaking out the door. Each one had a story, a struggle, a reason for needing that coffee, just like he'd had a reason for giving away his last few dollars, just like Margaret had a reason for her tests. The question was, what were everyone else's reasons for wanting him to fail? The dossier landed on Tom's desk with the weight of an anvil. Inside, proof that Chen Holdings' biggest charity initiative was being systematically exploited. Cancer treatment funds diverted through shell companies, hospice care buildings that existed only on paper, a decade of fraud totaling nearly $1 billion. "$2. I need you to bury it," Margaret said, her voice unnaturally calm. She stood at the window, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. "If this gets out, the entire foundation collapses. Thousands of legitimate recipients lose their care, including your mother." Tom's hands trembled as he read the report. Names jumped out at him. Board members, executives, even Rebecca Morton. All complicit, all growing rich off others' suffering. "Why show me this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because Bertrand Laurent's representatives are waiting in conference room 3. They're prepared to offer you $8 million for that file." She turned, her expression unreadable. "That's enough to pay for your mother's entire treatment plan, with plenty left over." Tom's throat went dry. "You knew about the lunch invitation." "I orchestrated it." She picked up his coffee cup. Still the Daily Grind's brand, still his one connection to his old life. "The question is, what will you do with that information?" The numbers swam before his eyes. $8 million. His mother would never have to worry about medical bills again. He could finish his degree, buy a house, start a foundation of his own. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. His mother's latest test results. Treatment showing remarkable progress. Dr. Williams wants to discuss extending the protocol. Treatment paid for by Chen Holdings Foundation. Tom stood, straightening his tie. "You once asked me why I bought your coffee that day." He gathered the papers, squaring their edges with deliberate care. "I said it was because I knew what it felt like having a card declined. But that wasn't the whole truth." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "I did it because my father taught me that character is what you do when the choice costs you something." He met her gaze. "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to walk into conference room 3. I'm going to record their attempt at bribery. Then I'm going to help you track down every penny they stole and make them pay it back. Even if it cost you $8 million. Some things cost more than money. He picked up his tablet. Besides, I learned from the best how to run a sting operation. For a moment, something like pride flickered across Margaret's face. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. A real smile, not her usual calculated one. "It seems we have another player in the game," she said, showing him the screen. An email from Bertrand Laurent himself. Subject: "The final test, my dear Margaret. Your boy Wonder just forwarded me the entire operation file, along with a request for whistleblower protection and a complete audit of both our foundations." He didn't even open the briefcase of cash we left in his office. "You win our bet. Not everyone has a price." Tom stared at the email, then at the briefcase by his desk he hadn't even noticed. This whole thing, the fraud, the bribe, was a test, Margaret finished. One you passed more thoroughly than either of us expected. She sat on the edge of his desk, something she'd never done before. But now comes the real challenge. What's that? Teaching others to do the same. She handed him an envelope, heavy paper, gold letterhead. Inside was a contract making him Director of Ethical Operations, with a mandate to reform the entire Foundation's governance structure. The salary was less than Bertrand's bribe, but as Tom signed his name, he knew he'd made the right choice. "One question," he said, capping his pen. "That day in the cafe, was your card really declined?" Margaret Chen, master of manipulation and moral tests, actually blushed. "No," she admitted, "but the coffee was terrible. I only kept coming back to observe you." "I know," Tom grinned. "That's why I started making yours differently. Single origin. Beans, double-filtered, touch of cinnamon." It was her turn to stare. "You knew?" "Not who you were, but I knew someone who could afford Louboutins, probably wasn't having card troubles. I figured you had your reasons." He shrugged. "Sometimes kindness means playing along." Margaret looked at her protégé with new eyes. Perhaps, she realized, she wasn't the only one running tests all this time. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before Tom, its fluorescent lights harsh against the pre-dawn darkness. His new Armani suit felt like armor in this familiar battlefield of plastic chairs and worried faces. Room 417, his mother's new private suite, courtesy of Chen Holdings' premium healthcare plan. "Mr. Mitchell." Dr. Williams emerged from the room, her face carefully neutral. "We need to discuss your mother's latest results." Inside, his mother slept fitfully, smaller somehow against the expensive linens. The machines tracking her vital signs hummed with quiet urgency. On the bedside table, a hospital bill sat unopened next to a framed photo. Tom at his new office, his mother beaming beside him during her one good day last week. "The treatment's not working anymore," Dr. Williams said softly. "There's an experimental protocol, but—" She hesitated, glancing at his suit. "Even with your new position, the cost would be significant." Tom's phone buzzed. Margaret. Third meeting he'd missed this morning. He silenced it without looking. How significant? 2 million. Insurance won't cover experimental treatments. The number hung in the air like a guillotine. 2 weeks ago, it would have been impossible. Now, it represented roughly 8 months of his new salary. Substantial, but not insurmountable. Unless... His phone buzzed again. This time a text from Margaret. "Where are you? Board needs those ethics guidelines. Also, Bertrand called. Says to remind you about karma." Tom looked at his mother, remembering her voice. "Integrity isn't for sale, Tommy." Even in her sleep. Her forehead creased with pain. He pulled out his corporate card, the one meant strictly for business expenses. One swipe, and he could authorize the treatment. Who would question it? He'd already proven his integrity with the Laurent test. Surely he'd earned some latitude. His mother stirred. "Tommy, is that you?" "Hey, Mum." He tucked the card away, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like $1 million, she smiled weakly. "Must be all this fancy treatment. You didn't—" Her eyes narrowed. "You didn't do anything foolish for this, did you?" Before he could answer, his phone lit up. Margaret again, but this time copying him on an email chain he wasn't meant to see. From B. Laurent L. globalventures.com to mchenachenholdings.com. Subject: Sarah Mitchell's treatment. Margaret, your boy's mother? Consider it done. But he can't. And no, it came from us. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. B. From mchenachenholdings.com to B. Laurent L. globalventures.com. Subject: Sarah Mitchell's treatment. Bertrand. Agreed. Let him face the choice. His integrity isn't on sale, but his character needs tempering. Sometimes mercy must be earned through trial. Send the authorization directly to Williams. MC Tom's vision blurred. They were testing him again, always testing. But this time, with his mother's life as collateral, he found himself reaching for his old leather journal, the one he still kept in his breast pocket. Opening to a blank page, he wrote, "Dear Ms. Chen, I know you're reading this. You taught me. Too well not to notice the forwarded email's timestamp was wrong. Another test? Fine. Here's my answer. I choose integrity. Not because it's right, but because my mother taught me that how we get something matters as much as what we get. I'm selling my apartment, liquidating my 401k. It won't cover everything, but it's a start. Not asking for help, not because of pride, but because some battles define us. The ethics guidelines are on your desk. I finished them at 3 a.m. in the hospital cafeteria. Tom, he sealed the journal entry in an envelope marked M. Chen, handed it to his assistant, and turned back to his mother's room. To his surprise, Dr. Williams was smiling. "The strangest thing," she said. "The hospital just received full funding for 50 experimental treatment slots. Your mother's name was first on the list. Something about a blind study grant from the Margaret Chen Medical Initiative." Tom looked at his sleeping mother, then at his corporate card, still unopened in his pocket. Sometimes mercy came disguised as a test. Sometimes integrity meant recognizing the difference. His phone buzzed one final time. Margaret again. "Karma, Mr. Mitchell," and perhaps a reminder that not all kindness needs to be earned. Some gifts are freely given, like a cup of coffee on a cold morning. P.S. The ethics guidelines were perfect. Even Bertrand was impressed. The conference room fell silent as Tom placed a single paper coffee cup in the center of the massive mahogany table. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their ergonomic chairs, while Margaret watched from the head of the table, her expression unreadable. "This," Tom said, tapping the cup, "is how we're going to revolutionize corporate giving." Rebecca Morton snorted. "With coffee? How quaint." "No," Tom replied, his voice steady, "with dignity. When someone's card declines at the daily grind, they don't just lose a coffee. They lose face, pride, self-respect. But when someone steps in to help, something magical happens. The helper gains as much as the helped." He clicked his presentation remote. The screen filled with his proposal. The Mitchell Method. Empowerment. Through dignity. Currently, Chen Holdings distributes $4 billion in annual charitable giving. We verify recipients, track outcomes, and pat ourselves on the back. He paused, meeting each board member's eyes. "But we're doing it wrong." Harrison Wells leaned forward. "Our giving metrics are the best in the industry. Our metrics measure money, not impact." Tom brought up a new slide, a photo of his mother, in her hospital bed. "This is Sarah Mitchell, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. When the Margaret Chen Initiative funded her experimental treatment, they didn't just save a life, they preserved a family's dignity. No public announcements, no photo ops, no strings attached." He clicked again. Security footage from his old cafe appeared, dozens of small moments of kindness playing in silence. Every day, people help strangers without recognition. Imagine if we could scale that kind of genuine connection. Margaret's pen moved across her notebook, but her eyes never left Tom. "I propose we restructure our entire charitable arm. No more giant checks and press releases. Instead, we create thousands of small, anonymous opportunities for genuine help. Medical debt quietly vanished. College tuition mysteriously covered. Small business loans that appear just when hope runs out. And how exactly do we verify recipients? Rebecca demanded. How do we prevent fraud? Tom smiled. The same way Ms. Chen verified me. We watch, we test. We look for people who help others, even when they think no one's looking. He pulled out a thick binder, hundreds of profiles, each representing a potential recipient. I've spent weeks building this database. Every person here has demonstrated a character through action, not application forms. The room erupted in overlapping objections, cost inefficiency, implementation challenges, PR concerns. Tom let them argue until Margaret finally raised her hand for silence. Mr. Mitchell, she said, you're suggesting we essentially hide $4 billion of charitable giving. Our shareholders will see better returns, Tom interrupted, because we're not just giving money, we're investing in human capital. Every person we help becomes a potential helper themselves. It's exponential growth, but in kindness instead of dollars. He distributed sealed envelopes to each board member. Inside each envelope is proof that someone in this room has already benefited from anonymous kindness. Someone paid a medical bill, covered a child's tuition, helped during a moment of crisis. You just never knew who or why. One by one, the board members opened their envelopes. The room grew quieter with each revelation. We're not in the charity business, Tom concluded. We're in the dignity business, and dignity properly invested yields returns no spreadsheet can measure. Margaret closed her notebook. And if we approve this restructuring, how do you propose to run it? The same way you ran your coffee shop experiments, hidden in plain sight, a network of observers identifying genuine need and authentic character. No applications, no publicity, just help arriving exactly when and where it's needed most. Like a cup of coffee on a cold morning, Margaret murmured. Exactly. Tom gathered his materials. I'll leave you to discuss. But remember, everyone in this room now knows how it feels to be helped without strings or spectacle. That's what I'm proposing we do for others. As he reached the door, Margaret spoke again. One question, Mr. Mitchell. The security footage from your old cafe. How did you get it? Tom paused. I didn't, but I knew you'd have it and that you'd notice if I included it in the proposal. For the first time, Margaret Chen smiled in front of her entire board. Still making the perfect cup of coffee, I see. I just serve it, Tom replied. You're the one who taught me how to make it matter. The tabloid headline screamed across Tom's tablet. Billionaire's secret life. Chen Holdings CEO's hidden identity revealed. Below it, a grainy photo showed Margaret at the daily grind, taken the day Tom had bought her coffee. His stomach churned as he scrolled through the article, each word a fresh betrayal. Sources inside Chen Holdings confirm that Margaret Chen, the reclusive CEO worth an estimated $12 billion, has been conducting elaborate social experiments on unsuspecting citizens. Using false identities and staged scenarios, Chen has reportedly been testing people's moral character without their knowledge or consent. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the story broke. Reporters, board members, even his old colleagues from the cafe. But it was the message from Rebecca Morton that made his blood run cold. Emergency board meeting, 1 p.m. Bring your resignation. Letter, after all, we can't have a CEO who manipulates people, can we? Unless you have something to add to the story. The implications were clear. They thought he had leaked the story. Why wouldn't they? He was the outsider, the coffee shop, charity case who'd risen too fast. The perfect scapegoat. Security footage played on the lobby's massive screens as he entered Chen Holdings. Clips of Margaret's cafe visits, her interactions, her tests. Someone had accessed the secure servers. Someone with high-level clearance. Margaret's office was dark when he arrived, but he could make out her silhouette against the windows. She didn't turn around. "The Mitchell method launch is cancelled," she said flatly. "The board feels we need to focus on damage control. Ms. Chen, don't." Her voice cracked slightly. "Just don't. 30 years of work. 30 years of trying to understand human nature, to find genuine goodness, all exposed for public ridicule. And the worst part?" She finally turned, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "They're right. I did manipulate people. I did deceive them, including you." Tom placed his tablet on her desk, the headline glowing accusingly. "Did you? What? Did you actually manipulate people, or did you simply observe them being themselves?" He pulled out his old leather journal. "You never forced anyone to make their choices. You just watched what they did naturally. Like that. Day with the coffee. You didn't ask for my help. You didn't even hint at needing it. I chose to help because that's who I am. And now," she gestured at the chaos outside, "what's your choice now?" Tom opened his journal to a fresh page and began to write. "Statement for immediate release. My name is Thomas Mitchell. 1 month ago, I was a waiter at the Daily Grind. Today, I am Director of Ethical Operations at Chen Holdings. What happened in between is not a story of manipulation or deception. It's a story about seeing people for who they truly are." Margaret moved to stop him. "Tom, don't. You don't have to fall on your sword for me." "I'm not." He continued writing. "I'm telling the truth. You didn't create who I am. You just saw me, really saw me, like you've seen thousands of others who society overlooks." His phone buzzed again. Rebecca Morton demanding his presence at the board meeting. He ignored it. "The real scandal," he said, still writing, "isn't that a billionaire CEO spent 30 years testing humanity. It's that she had to hide her identity to see people's genuine character. What does that say about us as a society?" The office door burst open. Rebecca Morton stood there, triumph written across her face. "The board is waiting. Time to face the music, both of you." Tom finished his statement with a flourish. "Actually, Ms. Morton, I think it's time for a different kind of test." He held up his phone, showing an email chain he'd been blind copied on months ago. Rebecca coordinating with a tabloid reporter, planning this very moment. "You should really be more careful with your email passwords," he said quietly. "Especially when testing new IT security protocols." Margaret stepped forward, her composure restored. "Still making the perfect cup of coffee, Mr. Mitchell? Just serving it where it's needed, Ms. Chen." He handed his statement to a stunned Rebecca. "Shall we go face the board together? I believe we have quite a story to tell them about genuine character." The Chen Holdings boardroom crackled with tension. Board members sat rigid in their chairs, eyes darting between Margaret, Tom, and Rebecca Morton, who gripped a copy of Tom's statement like it was a live snake. "Before we begin," Tom said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I'd like to share a security report." He connected his tablet to the room's display system. 3 weeks ago, someone accessed our secure servers using executive-level clearance. Not to steal money or corporate secrets, but to download years of surveillance footage. Harrison Wells leaned forward. "And you're just bringing this to our attention now?" "No," Margaret answered, a ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "He brought it to my attention immediately. We've been watching The Watcher ever since." Tom pulled up a series of emails, each one more damning than the last. Rebecca Morton negotiating with tabloids, planning the exact timing of the leak, even calculating how the stock price would drop, allowing her secret partners to buy shares at a discount. "It's all lies," Rebecca sputtered. "He's trying to save himself. This nobody, this coffee boy." "That coffee boy," Margaret interrupted, "did exactly what I've spent 30 years looking for. He saw an opportunity for personal gain and chose integrity instead." She opened her ever-present notebook. "Just like he did at the Daily Grind, just like he's done every day since." The boardroom doors opened. Bertrand Laurent strolled in, carrying a familiar briefcase. "I believe this belongs in evidence." He placed it on the table. 8 million. dollars offered to Mr. Mitchell to betray Chen Holdings. He not only refused it, but used the attempt to uncover a larger conspiracy. Rebecca's face went ash white. You were all testing me?" "No," Tom said quietly. "We were just watching you be yourself, like Ms. Chen watched all of us. The only difference is some of us passed the test of character." He brought up one. Final email on the screen. Rebecca's last message to her conspirators. "Once Chen is exposed, Mitchell will take the fall. His story is too perfect. The struggling waiter who rose too fast. Public opinion will crucify them both. By the time the dust settles, we'll own controlling interest at pennies on the dollar. Sometimes kindness is just weakness waiting to be exploited." The room fell silent. Margaret stood, her presence filling the space. "When my father died, he told me to watch how people behave when they think no one is looking. Rebecca, we were all looking, and we saw exactly who you are." Security personnel appeared at the doors. Rebecca looked around wildly, seeking allies. Finding none. "You can't prove anything. I'm not the only one who thought your social experiments were crazy." The board, Harrison Wells interrupted, "has already voted unanimously. Check your email, Ms. Morton. Your resignation was accepted 5 minutes ago." As Rebecca was escorted out, Tom noticed Margaret writing one final note in her journal. He caught a glimpse. Subject 47,293. Final assessment. True character reveals itself not in single acts of kindness, but in consistent choices under pressure. Assessment complete. She closed the notebook and addressed the board. "The Mitchell method launches next week. No more hiding, no more tests, just genuine help for people who prove their character through actions, not applications." "And what about you?" Bertrand asked. "Still planning to hide in plain sight?" Margaret looked at Tom, who nodded encouragingly. "No," she said. "I think it's time for Chen Holdings to be as transparent as we expect others to be, starting with me." The next day's headline was different. Chen Holdings reveals revolutionary approach to corporate giving. CEO Margaret Chen steps into public eye, announces Mitchell method of charitable assessment, and below that, a smaller story that made Tom smile. Daily Grind coffee shop receives anonymous donation, every declined card to be honored for next year. Some tests, it seemed, never really ended. They just changed form. The Wall Street Journal called it the Great Transparency. CNBC dubbed it the Chen Revolution. But for Tom, watching Margaret Chen step onto the TED Talk stage, it was simply the truth, finally getting its moment in the light. "For 30 years, Margaret began, her voice carrying to the packed auditorium, "I lived a double life, not out of shame or fear, but because I believed we could only see humanity's true nature from the shadows. I was wrong." The screens behind her lit up with footage from the Daily Grind, not the grainy surveillance photos the tabloids had run, but clear, professional shots showing small acts of kindness. A teenager sharing his last dollar with a homeless man, a busy executive staying late to help a cleaner find her lost wedding ring, a broke waiter buying coffee for a stranger. "We've been asking the wrong questions," Margaret continued. "Instead of how do we verify need, we should have been asking how do we recognize character. Instead of applications, we should have been watching actions." Tom stood in the wings, his new business card heavy in his pocket. Thomas Mitchell, Chief Innovation Officer, Chen Laurent Charitable Initiative. The merger had been Margaret's idea, combining her resources with Bertrand's network to create something entirely new. Today, we're announcing the most ambitious transformation in corporate philanthropy's history. Margaret clicked to the next slide, the Mitchell Method's first quarterly results. No more giant checks, no more publicity stunts. Instead, we've created a network of observers, all trained to recognize and reward genuine character in action. The numbers told the story. 3 months, 2,000 recipients, each one chosen not for their need alone, but for their demonstrated character. Single mothers working 3 jobs and still volunteering at homeless shelters. Retired teachers, tutoring underprivileged kids for free, small business owners cutting into their own profits to help struggling employees. But here's the revolutionary part, Margaret smiled. We don't tell them they've been chosen. The help arrives anonymously, quietly, exactly when they need it most. Because true character isn't built by recognition. It's revealed by consistent choices made when no one is watching. Tom felt his phone buzz. A text from his mother. Just watched the live stream. You didn't tell me you were the Mitchell in the Mitchell method. So proud of you, Tommy. On stage, Margaret was introducing the next phase. Starting today, we're open sourcing our methodology. Any corporation can adopt the Mitchell method. Any foundation can join our observer network. Because this isn't about Chen Holdings anymore. It's about changing how we see and help each other. She paused, taking a sip of water from a paper cup that made Tom smile. The Daily Grind's logo was clearly visible. Some of you may be wondering, doesn't public disclosure defeat the purpose? If people know they're being watched for good deeds, won't they just perform for the cameras? She set down the cup. But that's the beauty of this system. We're not looking for single acts of charity. We're looking for patterns, consistency, character that runs so deep it doesn't know how to be anything else. The new company mission statement appeared on screen. The words Tom had helped craft during countless late-night sessions. We believe in human dignity. We invest in human character. We recognize that the greatest acts of kindness are often the quietest. We help without fanfare, without recognition, without strings. Because true change happens in the spaces between grand gestures, in the small choices made when no one is watching, in the daily decision to be better than our circumstances require. This is the Mitchell method. This is the future of philanthropy. Margaret turned, gesturing to the wings. And to explain how this works in practice, please welcome the man who inspired it all, not with grand theories or complex algorithms, but with a simple cup of coffee and an unwavering commitment to dignity. Tom straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and stepped into the light. Sometimes it seemed the best way to help from the shadows was to show others how to look for light in the darkness. And it all started with a declined credit card and a choice. The Wall Street Journal. The spread sat open on Tom's desk. The Invisible Revolution, how coffee shop kindness became a corporate movement. The article detailed how dozens of Fortune 500 companies had adopted the Mitchell method, creating a web of anonymous giving that was transforming lives across the country. But it was the small note clipped to the article that made Tom's throat tight. Cleared for treatment. Full remission likely. Whatever you're doing up there in that fancy office, keep doing it. Dr. Williams. His mother was going home today, not to his old apartment in Queens, but to a sunny cottage in the Berkshires, an anonymous gift from the Chen Laurent Initiative's healthcare division. Tom knew Margaret had arranged it, just as he knew she'd never admit it. Your 9 o'clock is here, his assistant called through the intercom. The Goldman Sachs team. Tom straightened his tie. Silk now, but the habit of adjusting it before. Big moments remained from his waiter days. Through his office window, he could see Manhattan stretching out below, the daily grind, just a tiny speck in the urban landscape. The Goldman executives filed in, led by their CEO, Patricia Chen. No relation to Margaret, as she quickly pointed out. They carried tablets loaded with data about their own pilot program using the Mitchell method. Remarkable results, Patricia began, pulling up charts. 6 months of quiet observation, followed by targeted anonymous assistance, employee morale up 40%, community engagement tripled, and our stock price, she smiled. Let's just say kindness is proving very profitable. Tom studied their data. The patterns were familiar now. Small acts of genuine character leading to life-changing interventions. A janitor who spent his lunch breaks teaching English to immigrant co-workers, suddenly finding his children's college tuition mysteriously covered. A secretary who used her savings to help a homeless family. discovering her underwater mortgage had been quietly refinanced. "But here's what really sold us," Patricia continued. "We started noticing recipients becoming givers themselves. It's like, what did your TED Talk call it? Exponential kindness," Tom supplied. "The ripple effect of dignity preserved." His phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Turn on CNBC, now." The wall screen flicked to life, showing a press conference at Bertrand Laurent's Paris headquarters. The billionaire looked almost gleeful as he made his announcement. "Today, Laurent Global is pledging $10 billion to expand the Mitchell method worldwide. But more importantly, we're changing our corporate structure. From now on, 30% of our annual profits will go directly into anonymous giving initiatives. We're calling it the coffee cup clause, because sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes." Tom's mind raced. $10 billion. Global expansion. The coffee cup clause. It was beyond anything they'd imagined when they'd first conceived the Mitchell method. Patricia Chen leaned forward. "That's actually why we're here. Goldman Sachs wants to be the first to adopt the coffee cup clause. Full implementation, 30% of profits, no strings attached." "You understand what that means?" Tom asked. "No press releases, no tax write-offs, complete anonymity." "We understand perfectly," Patricia smiled. "After all, true character is what you do when no one's watching, right?" After the meeting, Tom found himself back at the daily grind. The place had changed, new machines, renovated interior, but the spirit remained the same. He watched as a young barista quietly slipped a muffin to a hungry-looking student, watched her wave away the attempted payment with a smile. His phone buzzed again. Margaret had sent him the latest Observer report. Subject 147922, Daily Grind barista Sarah Chen, no relation. "Third time this week, observed helping customers in need. Pattern suggests consistent character. Recommend immediate intervention regarding her student loans." Tom smiled. Sarah was Patricia Chen's daughter, though neither Margaret nor Patricia knew it yet. The wheel of kindness turning full circle. He ordered his usual coffee, paid with his corporate card, and left a tip that would change Sarah's life, though she wouldn't know it for weeks. Sometimes the best view of a revolution was from right where it started, and it all began with a declined credit card and a simple choice. 1. Year after the launch of the global Mitchell method, Margaret Chen stood in her office, watching Tom mentor his first observer recruit. Through the glass walls, she could see him pointing out subtle behavioral patterns to a young analyst, the same way she had once watched him at the daily grind. "Notice how she shared her umbrella without being asked," Tom was saying. "But, more importantly, watch what she does after. No social media post, no telling her friends, just quiet kindness that she thinks no one saw." Margaret opened her worn leather notebook, now filled with a year's worth of new observations. But instead of cataloguing failures of human nature, the pages documented successes, a growing encyclopedia of quiet heroes discovered through the Mitchell method. "Ms. Chen," her assistant's voice came through the intercom, "the new board nominees are here." The conference room filled with faces that would have been unthinkable in corporate leadership a year ago. A former homeless man who'd built a network of unofficial shelters in his garage. A retired teacher who'd turned her pension into a secret college fund for underprivileged students. A taxi driver who'd spent 20 years keeping a list of regular customers he drove for free when they fell on hard times. "Welcome to Chen Holdings," Margaret began. Or as we now call it, the Chen Mitchell Foundation for Human Dignity. Tom entered, carrying his new business cards hot off the press. Thomas Mitchell, Executive Director of Human Investment. He'd insisted on keeping his old daily grind name tag pinned inside his jacket pocket, a reminder of where this all began. "Before we start," he addressed the nominees, "I want you to look at these." He distributed tablets showing surveillance footage, but not of potential recipients. Instead, the screen showed the board nominees themselves, caught in countless acts of invisible kindness over the years. "You were all chosen because we watched you when you thought no one was looking," Margaret explained. "Just like someone once watched Tom buying coffee for a stranger. One of the nominees, the taxi driver, raised his hand. But if you make us board members, won't that defeat the purpose? We'll be public figures." Tom smiled. "That's exactly why we chose you. Because after decades of doing good in secret, having the spotlight won't change who you are. Character isn't what we do for show. It's what we can't help but do, whether anyone's watching or not." Margaret's phone buzzed with a news alert. Global Kindness Index launches. Chen Mitchell Foundation introduces new economic metric. The article detailed how their observation methodology had been adapted into an alternative to GDP, measuring societal health through documented acts of character rather than just financial transactions. She watched Tom lead the orientation, noting how naturally he'd grown into his role. No longer the uncertain waiter, but not quite the polished executive either. He'd found his own way, keeping his authenticity while gaining the confidence to reshape corporate culture. "Your first assignment," he was telling the nominees, "is to train your own observers. Look for the qualities you've demonstrated yourselves: consistency, humility, the instinct to help without needing recognition." A junior analyst burst in, waving a tablet. "Mr. Mitchell, the Singapore data just came in. The ripple effect, it's exponential. Recipients are becoming observers. Observers are becoming donors. Donors are becoming better people," Margaret finished. She closed her notebook for perhaps the last time. Because that's what happens when we recognize dignity instead of just need. Tom caught her eye across the room, and for a moment they were back at the daily grind. A billionaire in disguise and a waiter with $23 to his name, both about to learn that character reveals itself in the smallest choices. But now they weren't testing humanity anymore. They were transforming it, one invisible act of kindness at a time. The bell above the daily grind's door chimed exactly as it had a year ago. Tom held it open for Margaret, both of them dressed down for the occasion, her in a simple sweater, him in his old Ranger's sweatshirt. No power suits, no pretense, just a billionaire and her chief innovation officer getting coffee on a cold Manhattan morning. "Still smells the same," Tom said, breathing in the familiar aroma of espresso and possibility. The cafe had been renovated. The anonymous donation had seen to that, but its soul remained unchanged. Sarah, the young barista they'd been watching, manned the counter. Her student loan burden had mysteriously vanished last month, though she didn't know the two regular customers in front of her had anything to do with it. "The usual?" she asked, already reaching for cups. "Oat milk latte for you, ma'am, and double. Espresso for—" She stopped, recognition finally dawning. The magazine on the counter showed Tom and Margaret's faces, along with the headline, "The Kindness Revolution. 1 year later." "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. You're them. The Mitchell method. The coffee story. It was here?" "It was." "You," came another voice. Steve, Tom's old manager, emerged from the back. "All those times you covered other people's orders, you were being tested?" Tom shook his head. "No, Steve, I was just being me. That's what Ms. Chen was really testing, whether we change our character based on who we think is watching." Margaret stepped forward, pulling out her credit card. "1 oat milk latte, please. And this time," she smiled at Tom, "this time let it go through." But before she could hand over her card, another customer stepped up, a young man in a worn coat, dark circles under his eyes suggesting long nights of worry. "Let me get that for you," he said, pulling out a battered wallet. Margaret started to protest, but Tom touched her arm. They watched as the young man insisted, despite his obvious financial strain, just as Tom had done a year ago. "I'm Danny," he said. I know this sounds weird, but I've been following the Mitchell method stories about helping strangers, preserving dignity. You inspire people to be better." Tom and Margaret exchanged glances. She reached for her notebook, but Tom shook his head. Some moments didn't need documentation. "Danny," Tom said, "how would you like to learn about being an observer?" "An observer?" Margaret pulled out a business card, not her CEO card, but a simple one reading Talent Scout Chen Mitchell Foundation. "Because sometimes," she said, handing it to Danny, "a cup of coffee is just the beginning." They sat in the corner table, Margaret's old observation post, and watched Danny return to his own table, staring at the card like it was made of gold. Sarah served their drinks, her hands shaking slightly with excitement. Steve hung up a new sign, "Home of the Mitchell Method." "We should tell them not to do that," Tom mused, sipping his espresso. "Let them have this one," Margaret said. "We can't keep all our good deeds invisible." She pulled out her notebook one last time, but instead of writing in it, she handed it to Tom. "I think it's time for a new observer to take over." Tom opened it to the final page, where a single line waited. Subject 47, 293. Final update. Sometimes the truest test of character is knowing when to step into the light, so others can find their way out of darkness. Outside, snow began to fall on Manhattan. Inside the daily grind, a billionaire and a former waiter drank coffee and watched humanity unfold. No longer testing, just observing. And at another table, Danny pulled out his phone, cancelling his lunch order so he could afford to buy coffee. For the next person who needed it, the bell chimed again. A new customer entered, fumbling with a declined credit card, and the wheel of kindness turned once more.